The dust storm had been building since noon, turning the New Mexico sky the color of old leather. Ethan McCallum squinted through the haze, urging his horse forward across the barren plateau. The wind whipped sand against his face like 1,000 tiny needles, and he pulled his bandana higher, cursing under his breath. It had been a long day checking the northern boundary of his father's ranch, and all he wanted was to reach his cabin before the storm turned truly vicious. The small wooden structure sat nestled in a grove of cottonwoods about 3 miles from the main ranch house, his refuge when the weight of being Samuel McCallum's only son became too heavy to bear. Thunder rumbled overhead, though no rain had fallen in weeks. Dry lightning flickered across the darkening sky, illuminating the twisted shapes of mesquite and sagebrush. His mare, Duchess, snorted nervously and picked up her pace without prompting. "Easy, girl," Ethan murmured, patting her neck. "Almost there." The cabin materialized through the swirling dust like a ship emerging from fog. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms his grandfather had built 40 years ago as a line shack, but Ethan had claimed it as his own when he turned 18. Now, at 23, it remained his sanctuary from his father's endless expectations and the suffocating propriety of ranch life. He dismounted quickly, leading Duchess into the small lean-to stable attached to the cabin's side. The wind howled through the gaps in the boards as he unsaddled her, working by feel in the growing darkness. He made sure she had water and a measure of oats before securing the stable door with a heavy wooden bar. The cabin door banged open before he could reach it, caught by a particularly violent gust. Ethan grabbed it, wrestling against the wind to pull it shut behind him. The sudden quiet was almost deafening after the storm's roar. He stood for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the gloom. Something felt different. Wrong. The air inside held an unfamiliar warmth, as if someone had recently been moving about. A faint scent lingered, something floral and feminine that had no business being in his rough bachelor's quarters. Ethan's hand moved instinctively to the Colt .45 at his hip, moving silently despite his spurs. He crossed to the table where he kept his oil lamp. The scratch of the match seemed unnaturally loud in the stillness. Light flooded the main room, revealing everything in its proper place: his few books on the shelf, the potbelly stove cold and dark, his spare rifle mounted above the fireplace. But the bedroom door stood slightly ajar, and he distinctly remembered closing it when he'd left 3 days ago. Drawing his pistol, Ethan approached the door. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed it open with his boot. The lamplight spilled across his narrow bed, illuminating a sight that stopped him cold. A young woman lay curled beneath his blanket, her dark hair spread across his pillow like spilled ink. Her face was pale, with shadows beneath closed eyes that spoke of exhaustion or illness. A torn dress of faded calico hung on the peg beside the bed, and muddy boots, far too small to be a man's, sat neatly on the floor. For a long moment, Ethan simply stared, his mind struggling to make sense of the impossible scene. A woman, in his bed, in his secret refuge where no one, not even his father, ever ventured. The metallic click of him cocking his pistol broke the spell. The woman's eyes flew open, startling blue against her dirt-smudged face. She sat up with a gasp, the blanket clutching to her chest, revealing she wore only a thin chemise beneath. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please don't shoot." "Who the hell are you?" Ethan demanded, keeping the gun trained on her. "What are you doing in my cabin?" She raised trembling hands, palms out. "My name is Sarah Bennett. I didn't mean any harm. I was just so tired. And the storm was coming, and I saw this place." "You broke into my home." The door wasn't locked. A ghost of defiance flickered in her eyes despite her obvious fear. "I knocked, but no one answered. I thought maybe I could just rest for a few hours before moving on." Ethan studied her more carefully, beneath the dirt and exhaustion. She was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 19 or 20. Her chemise was torn at the shoulder, revealing an ugly bruise spreading across her collarbone. More bruises marked her arms, some fresh and purple, others fading to yellow-green. "Moving on to where?" he asked, lowering the gun slightly but not holstering it. Sarah's gaze darted away. "West, California. Maybe anywhere but here." "You running from someone?" The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Sarah's fingers twisted in the blanket, and when she looked back at him, her eyes held a desperation that made something tighten in his chest. "If I say yes, will you turn me in?" Ethan considered this. By rights, he should march her straight to his father and let the old man sort it out. Samuel McCallum was a respected rancher, a man who believed in law and order and proper behavior. Finding a half-dressed woman in his son's bed would scandalize the entire county. But something in Sarah's eyes stopped him. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of a wolf caught in a trap, wild with pain and fear, but still defiant, still fighting. "Depends on what you're running from," he said finally. "You kill somebody."
"No,"
the word burst from her lips.
I wouldn't."
She took a shaky breath.
"I'm accused of stealing, but I didn't take anything. I swear it. He just said that because I wouldn't. Because I refused."
She trailed off, but Ethan could fill in the blanks easily enough. A young woman, probably working as domestic help, refusing advances from her employer. It was an old story in these parts.
He the one who gave you those bruises."
Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder.
"Among other things."
The wind rattled the windows, reminding Ethan that the storm was far from over. He made a decision that he suspected he'd come to regret. "All right," he said, holstering his gun. "You can stay tonight. Storm's too bad to send anyone out in it. Even a thief."
"I'm not a thief,"
Sarah said quietly. "So you say." He turned back toward the main room. "I'll sleep out here by the stove. You can have the bed."
"I couldn't."
"You already are," he pointed out dryly. "Might as well finish the night. Come morning, we'll figure out what to do with you." He started to close the door, then paused.
"There's water in the pitcher by the bed, and some biscuits in the tin on the shelf. They're a few days old, but still edible." "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "You don't know what this means."
"No," Ethan agreed.
"I don't. And frankly, Miss Bennett, I'm not sure I want to.
Come morning, you'll be on your way, and we'll both forget this ever happened." He closed the door firmly, leaving her to the bedroom while he made himself a rough pallet near the cold stove. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, and thunder crashed overhead. He lay staring at the ceiling, acutely aware of the woman, Sarah, just a thin wall away. What had he been thinking? His father would skin him alive if he found out. The proper thing would be to ride to town at first light and notify the sheriff. Let the law sort out whether she was telling the truth about the theft charges. But he kept thinking about those bruises, about the desperation in her eyes, about the way she'd said, "among other things," with such quiet resignation. Ethan had grown up on the frontier. He'd seen his share of violence, understood that life out here could be brutal and unforgiving, but he'd also been raised by a mother who taught him that strength should protect, not prey upon, the vulnerable. His mother had been gone 5 years now, taken by a fever no amount of money or influence could cure. Sometimes he wondered if she would recognize the man he was becoming under his father's relentless molding. A soft sound from the bedroom made him tense. Crying, no. More like restless movement, the sound of someone fighting nightmares. Without thinking, he rose and pressed his ear to the door.
"No, please, I didn't take it. Please don't."
The words were slurred with sleep, but clear enough. Ethan backed away, returning to his pallet. Whatever Sarah Bennett was running from, it followed her even into her dreams. He must have dozed, because the next thing he knew, gray dawn light was filtering through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie quiet in its wake. Ethan sat up, working the kinks from his back, and noticed the bedroom door stood open.
His heart sank. She'd run. Of course she had. What else had he expected? He rose and peered into the bedroom, confirming his suspicions. The bed was neatly made, the torn dress gone from its peg. But then he heard it, the soft whinny of a horse from outside. Not Duchess, another horse entirely. Ethan grabbed his gun and eased open the cabin door. Sarah stood in the small corral, gently stroking the nose of a sorry-looking bay mare. She'd cleaned herself up somehow, her face scrubbed clean, her dark hair braided and pinned. The torn dress had been mended with rough stitches. In the morning light, he could see she was prettier than he'd realized, with fine features and those striking blue eyes. She turned at his approach, offering a hesitant smile. "I wasn't stealing your horse. This is Buttercup. She's mine. Well, as much as anything is mine. I hid her in the woods during the storm." "Buttercup?" Ethan couldn't help but smile at the name. The mare was sway-backed and knock-kneed, hardly the mount of a dangerous criminal. "She's not much, but she's carried me this far." Sarah patted the mare's neck affectionately. "I suppose you'll want me gone now?" Ethan knew he should say yes. Should send her on her way and wash his hands of whatever trouble she was carrying. But in the morning light, with the bruises standing out starkly against her pale skin, he found himself hesitating. "Have you eaten?" She blinked in surprise. The biscuits you mentioned. Thank you. Come inside. I'll make coffee and a proper breakfast before you go." He turned back to the cabin before she could respond, not wanting to examine too closely why he was extending her stay. In the kitchen area, he busied himself with the coffee pot and skillet, acutely aware of her presence as she entered and sat gingerly at his small table. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. When I heard someone coming last night, I thought I was done for. Most men finding a strange woman in their bed would have different ideas." Ethan cracked eggs into the skillet with perhaps more force than necessary. "I'm not most men." "No," she agreed. "You're not." They ate in surprisingly comfortable silence. Sarah was clearly famished, trying hard not to wolf down the food but failing. When she'd cleaned her plate, Ethan refilled it without comment. "So," he said finally, "California." She nodded. "I have a cousin there, in San Francisco. She wrote that there's work for women who can sew and keep house. That's a long way for a woman alone. I've made it this far." On Buttercup, he couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. "That mare won't make it another 100 miles, let alone to California." Sarah's jaw set stubbornly. "We'll manage." "The man you're running from, he likely to come looking?" Fear flickered across her face before she could hide it. "Thomas Granger doesn't like to lose his possessions." Thomas Granger. Ethan knew the name. A merchant in Springer, about 40 miles east. Rich, influential, and by all accounts, a mean son of a gun. "You worked for him." "In his house. His wife hired me as a maid, but she died last winter. After that, he—" She shrugged, the gesture speaking volumes. "And the theft? $20 from his strongbox. He said I took it, but I think he just wanted an excuse to keep me from leaving. Said he'd have me arrested if I tried to go." "But you left anyway." 3 nights ago. I couldn't stay. Not after he—" She stopped, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter now." But it did matter. Ethan realized with a sinking feeling, because Thomas Granger was exactly the type to hire bounty hunters to retrieve what he considered his property. And they'd be looking for a young woman traveling alone on a distinctive bay mare. "You can't go to California," he heard himself saying. "Not like this. Granger will have men watching the trails west." Sarah's shoulders sagged. "Then what am I supposed to do? I can't go back. I won't." The smart thing would be to stay out of it. The safe thing. The thing his father would expect. Instead, Ethan found himself saying, "You could stay here for a few days, until the search dies down." She stared at him. "Here in your cabin. Just until you can travel safely. I'm away from the ranch most days anyway, checking the herds. No one would know you were here." "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." It was a fair question, and one Ethan couldn't fully answer even to himself. Maybe it was the bruises. Maybe it was the defiance in her eyes despite her fear. Or maybe it was just that he was tired of always doing the safe, expected thing. "Let's just say I don't care much for men like Thomas Granger," he said finally. "And I care even less for the idea of sending you back to him." Sarah studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing more than he intended to show. "All right," she said quietly. "A few days, just until it's safe." Ethan nodded, already wondering what he'd gotten himself into. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the storm clouds. It was going to be a beautiful day, the kind of crystalline morning that made a man grateful to be alive in this hard country. But as he looked at Sarah Bennett, with her bruised face and desperate courage, Ethan had the feeling that his simple, predictable life had just become a great deal more complicated. He had no idea how right he was. The first 3 days passed in an uneasy rhythm. Ethan would leave at dawn to work the ranch, returning near dusk to find Sarah had tidied the cabin and prepared a simple meal from his meager supplies. They ate together in careful silence, dancing around the growing tension between them like cowboys circling a spooked horse. On the 4th evening, Ethan returned to find her sitting outside, mending one of his shirts by the fading light. The domestic scene struck him like a physical blow. So normal, so right, and so absolutely impossible. "You don't need to do that," he said, dismounting from Duchess. Sarah looked up with a slight smile. "I need to earn my keep somehow. Can't just sit here all day like a princess in a tower. You're a guest, not a servant. I've been a servant most of my life. Mr. McCallum. Don't know how to be much else." The formality grated on him. "It's Ethan, and you're more than just a servant." She ducked her head, concentrating on her stitching. "That kind of thinking is what got me into this mess." He wanted to ask what she meant, but Miguel appeared over the rise, spurring his horse hard. Ethan's stomach dropped. The young vaquero only rode like that when there was trouble. Señor Ethan Miguel pulled up in a cloud of dust. "Your father. He looks for you. There are men at the big house. They ask about a woman." Sarah's face went white. The shirt slipped from her nerveless fingers. "What men?" Ethan demanded. "2 bounty hunters. They say they track a thief. A woman who stole from Señor Granger in Springer." Ethan glanced at Sarah, who had risen to her feet, ready to run. He caught her wrist gently. "Wait, Miguel, what did my father tell them?" "He say he knows nothing, but he is angry, very angry. He wants you at the house, now." "Tell him I'm checking the north pasture. Won't be back until late." Miguel's dark eyes flicked to Sarah, understanding dawning. "Si, señor, the north pasture. Very far. You may be camped there tonight." "No." "Maybe." Ethan pressed a silver dollar into his friend's hand. "Gracias, hermano." Miguel touched his hat brim and wheeled his horse around. "Vaya con Dios," he called over his shoulder. As soon as he was out of sight, Ethan turned to Sarah. "Get inside. We need to talk." In the cabin, she paced like a caged animal. "I should leave, tonight, if they're already here." "If you run now, they'll catch you within a day." Ethan pulled off his hat, running fingers through sweat-dampened hair. "Those aren't local sheriffs, Sarah. Bounty hunters are different. They know how to track, and they don't give up easy." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Her voice cracked with desperation. "First, tell me the truth. All of it. I can't help if I don't know what I'm dealing with." She sank onto a chair, seeming to shrink into herself. "What do you want to know?" "Start with Granger. How long did you work for him?" 2 years. His wife, Martha, she was kind, taught me to read better, to speak proper, said I had potential." A bitter laugh escaped her.
After she died, everything changed. Thomas started noticing me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Noticing? At first, just comments. How pretty I was. How I was wasted as a maid. Then he started finding excuses to touch me, fixing my collar, brushing past in hallways. She wrapped her arms around herself. I tried to avoid him, but the house wasn't that big. What about the money? 3 weeks ago, he cornered me in the pantry, said he'd set me up in a nice little house in town, buy me pretty dresses, make me a real lady. All I had to do was... She shuddered. When I refused, he got angry, said I was putting on airs, thinking I was too good for him. That's when he hit you. Not then. That came later, when I told him I was leaving. He said no decent woman would turn down such a generous offer. Said I must be selling myself to someone else. Her hands clenched in her lap. The next morning, $20 was missing from his strongbox. He called the sheriff, said I was the only one with access to the house, said he'd caught me trying to seduce him to cover up the theft. But you didn't take it. I think he took it himself, just to have a hold on me. Sheriff believed him, of course. Why wouldn't he? Thomas Granger is a respectable businessman. I'm just a nobody orphan girl who cleans his floors. The story was depressingly common. Ethan had heard variations of it his whole life. Powerful men taking what they wanted, using the law as a weapon against those who couldn't fight back. So you ran. What choice did I have? Stay and be arrested, or stay and become his... She couldn't finish the sentence. I took Buttercup. She was my father's before he died. The one thing I had left, and I ran. Ethan moved to the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. His father would be furious. Samuel McCallum had built his empire on respect for law and order. Harboring a fugitive, and even one falsely accused, went against everything he'd taught his son. But looking at Sarah's bruised face, at the defeat in her shoulders, Ethan found he didn't care. Those bounty hunters will search every line shack and cabin for 50 miles, he said. This place isn't exactly secret. They'll come here eventually. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry I've brought trouble to your door when you've been nothing but kind. Stop! He turned to face her. I made the choice to help you. I'll see it through. Why? The question hung between them. Why do you care what happens to me? Ethan couldn't answer. Didn't want to examine the way his pulse quickened when she smiled, or how the cabin felt alive with her in it. Instead, he said, my mother used to tell me that a man's character shows in how he treats those who can't fight back. She sounds wise. She was. He cleared his throat. We need to get you somewhere safer. There's a line shack about 10 miles north, up in the canyon country. Hardly anyone knows about it. You could hold up there while I figure out our next move. Our next move? Sarah stood, color rising in her cheeks. This isn't your fight, Ethan. You've done more than enough. Maybe I'm making it my fight. They stood facing each other in the lamplight, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Sarah's lips parted slightly, and Ethan found himself moving closer, drawn by something stronger than common sense. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. They froze, Sarah's eyes wide with terror. Ethan, you in there, boy! His father's voice. Ethan motioned Sarah toward the bedroom, waiting until she'd slipped inside before opening the door. Samuel McCallum stood on the threshold, his weathered face hard as granite. Even at 60, he was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with iron-gray hair and eyes the same shade as his son's. Father, didn't expect you out this way. Don't play games with me, boy. Samuel pushed past him into the cabin. His sharp gaze swept the room, noting the 2 plates on the table, the mended shirt on the chair. Where is she? Where is who? Samuel's hand cracked across Ethan's face, hard enough to snap his head sideways. I taught you better than to lie to me. Miguel's a good boy, but he can't lie worth a damn. Now where's the girl? Ethan tasted blood where his teeth had cut his lip. She's not here.
The hell she isn't.
Samuel strode to the bedroom door.
Miss Bennett, I know you're in there. Come on out. Let's discuss this like civilized people.
For a moment, silence. Then the door opened and Sarah emerged, chin high despite her obvious fear. Samuel studied her with the same calculating look he used on horses he was considering buying.
So you're the thief everyone's looking for?
I'm no thief, Mr. McCallum. That's not what Thomas Granger says, not what the law says.
The law says whatever men like Granger pay it to say.
Sarah shot back, surprising everyone with her boldness. Samuel's eyebrows rose.
You've got spine. I'll give you that.
He turned to Ethan. You know what you're risking. Harboring a fugitive is a serious crime. You could lose everything.
She didn't do anything wrong.
That's not for you to decide. Samuel's control cracked slightly. 23 years I've built this ranch. 23 years of blood and sweat and sacrifice. You think I'll let you throw it away for some pretty face?
This isn't about the ranch.
Everything is about the ranch, Samuel roared. It's your legacy, your responsibility, not some dance hall girl with a sad story. I'm not a dance hall girl, Sarah said quietly. Samuel ignored her, focusing on his son. Those bounty hunters are staying in town. Come morning, they'll expand their search. When they find her here, and they will find her, they'll arrest you too. Is that what you want?
What I want is to do what's right.
What's right is following the law. Even when the law is wrong, father and son faced off, decades of conflict crystallizing in this moment. Ethan had always bent to his father's will, always chosen the safe path. But something had shifted in the past 4 days. Maybe it was Sarah's quiet courage. Maybe it was his own dissatisfaction finally boiling over. Either way, he wasn't backing down. I'm not turning her in, he said firmly. Samuel's face darkened. Then you're a fool, and I didn't raise a fool. He headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. You've got until dawn to come to your senses. Bring her to the main house, and we'll sort this out legal-like. Otherwise, you're on your own, both of you. The door slammed behind him, leaving echoing silence. Sarah sank into a chair, trembling.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant...
Stop apologizing. Ethan knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. They were calloused from work, but still somehow delicate. This was my choice. Your father's right. I should go. Where those bounty hunters know you're in the area now, they'll be watching the roads, the towns. You wouldn't make it 10 miles. Then what do we do? Ethan squeezed her hands gently. We stick to the plan. I'll take you to the canyon shack tonight. Then I'll go to town. See what I can learn about these hunters. Maybe find a way to throw them off your trail. And if you can't... He met her eyes steadily. Then we'll find another way. I'm not letting them take you back to Granger. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding deeper than words. Sarah lifted one hand to touch his face, her fingers gentle on the cheek his father had struck. You're a good man, Ethan McCallum, better than you know. He caught her hand, pressing it against his face. The touch sent fire through his veins, and he saw his own desire reflected in her eyes. For a heartbeat, they swayed toward each other. Then reality crashed back. They pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily. We should go, Ethan said roughly. The longer we wait, the more danger you're in. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice, while she gathered her few belongings. Ethan saddled both horses and packed supplies. The moon was rising as they set out, casting long shadows across the desert floor. They rode in silence, hyper-aware of each other. Every time their horses drew close, Ethan felt that same electric pull. It was madness, falling for a woman he'd known less than a week, a woman who'd be gone as soon as it was safe. But his heart didn't seem to care about logic. The canyon shack appeared just before midnight, a rough structure built into the shelter of overhanging rock. Ethan helped Sarah dismount,
his hands lingering on her waist longer than necessary. "It's not much," he said, lighting a lantern. "But it's hidden, and there's fresh water from the spring." "It's perfect." She turned in the small space, taking in the narrow cot, the potbelly stove, the shelf of emergency supplies. "How long do you think I'll need to stay?" "Few days, maybe a week. I'll come when I can. Bring food and news." "Ethan?" She faced him, moonlight and shadow playing across her features. "What happens after? When it's safe to travel, do I just leave?" The question he'd been avoiding. The logical answer was yes, she should go to California, start fresh where no one knew her past. But standing there in the flickering lantern light, logic seemed very far away. "I don't know," he admitted. "I can't think that far ahead." "Because you're too noble to ask me to stay, or because you don't want me to?" "Sarah." She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she'd used. "I need to know. Ethan, am I just another stray you're protecting, or is there something more here?" His control, held by the thinnest thread for days, finally snapped. He pulled her against him, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was desperate and demanding and absolutely perfect. She responded instantly, her arms winding around his neck, her body molding to his. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. "Does that answer your question?" he asked hoarsely. "It's a start." Her smile was shaky but real, though it does complicate things. "Everything about this is complicated." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But I can't seem to care. Your father will disown you. Maybe it's time I made my own way." She pulled back to search his face. "You'd give up everything for me." "I'd give up a life that was never really mine," he corrected. "For a chance at something real." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I'm not worth that sacrifice." "Let me be the judge of that." He kissed her again, softer this time, trying to pour all his certainty into the touch. When they parted, he could see hope warring with fear in her expression. "I have to go," he said reluctantly. "Come morning, Father will have the whole ranch looking for me. I need to be where I'm supposed to be." "When will I see you again?" "Tomorrow night. If I can manage it, day after at the latest." He cupped her face in his hands. "Stay hidden. Don't light fires during the day. There's enough food and water for a week if you're careful." "I'll be fine. I have survived worse than camping." But as Ethan rode away, leaving her small figure silhouetted in the shack's doorway, he wondered if either of them really understood what they were risking. His father's threat hadn't been idle. Samuel McCallum had built his empire through sheer force of will, and he didn't tolerate defiance. By choosing Sarah, Ethan might lose everything: his inheritance, his home, his place in the only world he'd ever known. Looking back at the hidden shack one last time, he realized the truth: he'd already lost his heart. Everything else was just details. The saloon in Coyote Springs was thick with smoke and bad intentions when Ethan pushed through the bat-wing doors. He'd come to town under the pretense of picking up supplies, but his real purpose was to gather information about the bounty hunters pursuing Sarah. He spotted them immediately. 2 men at a corner table, standing out like wolves among sheep. The larger one had a face like hammered leather and cold eyes that missed nothing. His companion was younger, lean as a whip, with the nervous energy of a rattlesnake. "Whiskey," Ethan told Jake behind the bar, positioning himself where he could watch the hunters in the mirror. "Hear your pa's none too happy with you," Jake said, pouring generous. "Word is you two had words last night." News traveled fast in a small town. "We've had words before." "Not like this." According to Miguel, something about a missing woman. Ethan sipped his whiskey, saying nothing. Jake knew better than to push, but others in the saloon weren't so discreet. Within minutes, Ethan could feel the weight of curious stares. "You're McCallum's boy." The voice came from behind, the older bounty hunter. Up close, he was even more imposing.
with scarred hands and a navy coat worn low on his hip.
I am.
Name's Hale, Sheriff Hale, from Springer. The man settled onto the neighboring stool, though Ethan noticed he kept his gun hand free. My associate and I are looking for someone. Thought you might help. Don't know anything about it.
Hale smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Now that's interesting. Your father said the same thing, but he seemed mighty upset about something, almost like he knew more than he was saying.
My father gets upset about a lot of things.
True enough. Haley signaled for a drink. Still, funny how that missing woman's trail leads right to McCallum Land. Funnier still how you've been spending time at that little cabin of yours instead of the main house.
Ethan kept his face neutral despite the alarm bells in his head. They knew about the cabin.
I like my privacy. Privacy's a fine thing, unless you're using it to hide fugitives.
Hale's companion had drifted over, positioning himself on Ethan's other side.
That's what we call obstruction of justice. Serious crime.
Good thing I'm not hiding anyone then.
The younger hunter, Ethan mentally dubbed him Snake for his restless movements, leaned in close. Thomas Granger's offering $100 for that girl's return. Lot of money. Might even split it with someone who helped us find her.
Or, Hale added conversationally,
we could just arrest whoever's hiding her. Judge tends to be harsh on people who help thieves escape.
Ethan finished his whiskey in one burning swallow.
Like I said, I don't know anything about any missing woman. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have supplies to buy.
He stood to leave, but Hale's hand shot out, gripping his arm.
One more thing, boy. We'll be checking that cabin of yours tomorrow. If we find anything at all, suggesting you've been lying.
He let the threat hang.
Ethan jerked free. Check all you want. You won't find anything but dust and old furniture.
Outside, he forced himself to walk calmly to the general store, knowing they were watching. His mind raced. Tomorrow. They'd search the cabin tomorrow. Thank God he'd moved Sarah to the canyon. But how long before they expanded their search? 20 pounds of flour, 10 of beans, coffee, salt pork, he told Mrs. Henderson behind the counter. She bustled about filling his order, chattering about the weather and her rheumatism. Ethan barely heard her.
Oh, and there's a letter for your father,
she added, producing an envelope.
From Austin. Looks official.
Ethan pocketed it absently. As he loaded his supplies, a familiar figure emerged from the telegraph office across the street. Thomas Granger himself, dressed in his city finest despite the dust. Their eyes met across the distance. Granger smiled and touched his hat brim in mocking salute. The ride back to the ranch passed in a blur. Ethan's thoughts churned like storm clouds. Granger was here personally. That meant he was taking Sarah's escape as a personal insult. Men like him didn't forget such slights. At the main house, he found his father in his study, poring over ledgers. Samuel didn't look up when Ethan entered. "Letter from Austin," Ethan said, placing it on the desk. "The Russell contract. Finally." Samuel slid it open, scanned the contents. "They've agreed to our terms. 500 head at $15 each."
"That's good news."
"Would be, if I could trust my foreman to handle the drive." Now Samuel did look up, his gaze hard. "Can I trust you?" "Ethan." "You know you can." "Do I because the son I raised wouldn't throw away his future for some girl he barely knows?"
"She has a name, Sarah Bennett, and she's innocent."
"Innocence is a luxury we can't afford." Samuel stood, moving to the window that overlooked his empire. "I came to this territory with nothing, built all this through strength and determination. You know what threatens it all, sentiment. Weakness. Compassion isn't weakness. It is when it blinds you to reality." Samuel turned back. "Those bounty hunters came by again today, asking questions about you. How long before they bring the real law into this?" "They are the law. Hale's a sheriff. From another jurisdiction, acting as a hired gun. But if they wire for federal marshals,
claim we're interfering with interstate commerce. He shook his head. I won't see everything I've built destroyed because you can't control yourself around a pretty face. It's not like that. Isn't it? Samuel's voice cut like a blade. You think I'm blind? Think I don't see how you look when her name comes up? You're burning for her, boy, and that fire will consume everything if you're not careful. The phrase hit too close to home. Ethan thought of Sarah in his arms last night, the heat between them that threatened all reason. Maybe some things are worth burning for, he said quietly. Samuel's face went red. Get out. When you come to your senses, we'll talk. Until then, stay away from the main house. Ethan left without another word. As he rode toward his cabin, he spotted dust on the horizon riders, moving fast. His gut clenched. Were the hunters coming early? But it was Miguel who crested the rise, spurring hard. Senor Ethan, trouble in town. Big trouble. What kind of trouble? The girl they look for, another one has come forward. Says she saw everything. Says the Bennett woman is innocent. Ethan's heart leaped. Who came forward? A black woman. Worked in Granger's house, too. She says she saw him take the money himself. Planted in Miss Bennett's room. Where is she now? That's the trouble, senor. She speak to the newspaper man this morning. Now she's disappeared. Some say Granger's men took her. Others say she got scared and ran. Miguel's face was grim. But the newspaper man, he won't run. Says he'll print the story tomorrow. A witness. Someone who could clear Sarah's name. But if Granger had already silenced her. Miguel, I need you to do something for me. Quietly. Anything. Senor, go back to town. Find out everything you can about this witness, her name, where she might have gone, and watch Granger. See what he does next. See, I understand. Miguel wheeled his horse. What will you do? I need to check on something. Be careful. Hermano, Granger's playing for keeps now. As Miguel rode off, Ethan changed direction, heading for the canyon. Sarah needed to know about this development. If they could find the witness, prove her testimony. The sun was setting when he reached the hidden shack. Sarah emerged before he could dismount, and the relief on her face made his chest tight. I was worried, she said simply, when you didn't come last night. I'm sorry, things have gotten complicated. He told her about the bounty hunters, Granger's arrival, and most importantly, the witness. Bessie, Sarah breathed. It must be Bessie Washington. She was the cook, the only other servant who lived in the house, but I thought Granger told everyone she'd gone back to Georgia. Apparently not. She talked to the newspaper this morning, said she saw Granger plant that money. Hope bloomed in Sarah's eyes, quickly followed by fear. But now she's missing. Miguel's trying to find out more. If we can locate her, get her somewhere safe until the story prints. Granger won't let that happen. He'll do whatever it takes to silence her. And the newspaper man. Sarah paced the small space. This is my fault? First you, now Bessie. Everyone who tries to help me gets hurt. Hey, Ethan caught her shoulders, stilling her. This isn't your fault. Granger's the villain here, not you. But if I hadn't run, he'd have forced you into his bed, or had you arrested on false charges anyway. You did the only thing you could. She searched his face. Why do you believe in me so completely? You barely know me. I know enough. His hand slid down her arms. I know you're brave enough to run rather than submit, strong enough to survive on your own, compassionate enough to worry about others even when you're in danger. You see too much good in me. Maybe you don't see enough. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Sarah rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. I should go, Ethan said reluctantly. The hunters are searching the cabin tomorrow. I need to make sure there's no trace of you. When will it be safe for me to leave here? I don't know, but Sarah...
He cupped her face. Whatever happens with this witness, with Granger, with everything, I want you to know something. When this is over, I want you to stay, not just in the territory, with me. Her eyes widened. Ethan, your father, will have to accept it or lose his son. I've made my choice. You'd give up everything. I'd gain everything that matters. He kissed her again, trying to pour all his certainty into the touch. Just think about it. Please. She nodded against his lips. Be careful. Granger's dangerous when cornered. So am I, Ethan said grimly. The ride back seemed endless. His mind churned with plans and possibilities. If they could find Bessie, protect her until her testimony became public. But Granger had money and influence. Would one woman's word be enough against his? At the cabin, Ethan set about erasing any sign of Sarah's presence. He burned the mended shirt, scattered the ashes, scrubbed the plates and cups until they shone. Even changed the bedding, though the faint scent of lavender seemed to linger. As he worked, he thought about his father's words. Was he burning for Sarah? Yes. The admission came freely now. Every moment away from her felt like holding his breath. Every thought of her in danger made his blood run hot with protective fury. A sound outside made him freeze. Horses, multiple riders, moving without lights. Too late for honest travelers. Ethan checked his Colt, then eased to the window. In the moonlight, he counted 4 men dismounting. Not the bounty hunters. These moved like men used to darker work. McCallum. The voice was Granger's, oily with false courtesy. I know you're in there. Come out. We need to talk. Ethan's mind raced. 4 against 1, and they had him cornered. But maybe that was an advantage. They thought he was alone. Helpless. Kinda late for social calls. Granger, he called back. Late problems require late solutions. I'm looking for my property. Thought you might know where she is. Sarah Bennett isn't property. She's a free woman. A free woman who stole from me, who's been spreading lies about me. Granger's voice hardened. I know you've been hiding her. Boy, your father's already washed his hands of you. No one's coming to help. Don't need help dealing with scum like you. Someone chuckled. One of Granger's men enjoying the show. Granger himself remained calm. Brave words for a man outnumbered 4-1. But I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make a deal. Not interested. You haven't heard the terms. Give me the girl, and I'll forget you were involved. Hell, I'll even throw in a bonus $500 for your trouble. More money than a cowboy sees in a year. Go to hell. I've been patient. McCallum, more patient than she deserves. But that ends now. Granger's voice dropped to a threatening growl. I've got men at every road, every waterhole, every possible shelter for 50 miles. She can't run forever. And when I find her, and I will find her, things will go badly for everyone who helped her. Ethan stayed silent, calculating distances, angles. The window was too exposed. The back door might work, but they probably had it covered. Last chance. Granger called. Tell me where she is, or things get unpleasant. I told you, I don't know where. The window exploded in a shower of glass. Ethan dove aside as gunfire erupted, bullets chewing into the walls. He rolled behind the heavy table, tipping it for cover. Alive! Granger roared. I want him alive. The shooting stopped, replaced by ominous silence. Ethan checked his ammunition. 6 shots in the Colt, another dozen in his belt. Not enough for a prolonged fight. Footsteps on the porch. They were coming. Ethan aimed at the door, waiting. It burst open and he fired twice, sending the first man tumbling back. But more were coming, and he couldn't cover both entrances. Something crashed through the back window. A lit torch. It rolled across the floor, catching the scattered papers and kindling near the stove. Within seconds, flames began to spread. Come out, McCallum, Granger shouted. Unless you want to burn. Smoke filled the cabin with shocking speed. Ethan's eyes watered as he tried to spot targets through the haze. The fire spread to the curtains, the bookshelf, eating through his sanctuary with mindless hunger. No choice. He had to move. Ethan burst through the front door, diving sideways as bullets whined past. He hit the ground rolling, came up firing. One of Granger's men spun and fell, but something slammed into Ethan's shoulder, driving him to his knees. Pain exploded through his left arm. Blood soaked through his shirt with alarming speed. "Got him!" someone yelled. Ethan tried to raise his gun, but his arm wouldn't cooperate. Dark spots danced in his vision as Granger's men closed in. Behind them, his cabin burned like a beacon, sending smoke and sparks into the night sky. "Where is she?" Granger stood over him, no longer pretending civility. "Tell me, or we'll see how much more you can bleed." Ethan spat blood. "Go to hell!" Granger's boot caught him in the ribs, sending fresh agony through his body. "Wrong answer." As consciousness faded, Ethan's last thought was of Sarah, safe in the canyon. Whatever happened to him, at least she was beyond Granger's reach. For now. Sarah woke with a start, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. The canyon shack was dark and silent, but an unease prickled at her skin like the moments before a storm. She'd learned to trust such instincts during her nights of running. Moving to the small window, she peered out at the star-filled sky. No sign of riders, no telltale dust clouds in the moonlight. Yet the feeling persisted. Then she saw it, a faint orange glow on the southern horizon, where Ethan's cabin lay. Fire. "No." The word escaped as a whisper. She grabbed her boots, her mind racing. It could be anything, a wildfire, a rancher burning brush. But deep in her bones, she knew. By the time she'd saddled Buttercup with trembling hands, the glow had intensified. Sarah fought the urge to race directly there. Ethan had made her promise to stay hidden, to stay safe. But if he was hurt, if he needed help, she compromised by taking a circuitous route, using every bit of cover the terrain offered. As she drew closer, the acrid smell of smoke confirmed her worst fears. Through the scrub brush, she could see the cabin, or what was left of it. Flames licked at the collapsed roof, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. "Ethan," she breathed, scanning desperately for any sign of him. Voices carried on the wind. Sarah dismounted, creeping forward on foot until she could see the cleared area in front of the burning structure. Her blood turned to ice. Ethan knelt in the dirt, his left arm hanging useless, blood soaking his shirt. Thomas Granger stood over him, flanked by 3 hired guns, even from a distance. She could see the cruel satisfaction on her former employer's face. "Still protecting her," Granger was saying. "How noble, how pointless." One of the men kicked Ethan in the back, sending him sprawling. Sarah bit her knuckle to stifle a cry. "Boss, we should get moving." One of the gunmen said nervously, "That fire's going to draw attention." "Let it," Granger replied. "Let everyone see what happens to those who defy me. Though I suppose we should relocate our guests somewhere more private." They hauled Ethan to his feet. He swayed, but stayed upright, his face set in lines of stubborn defiance even through the pain. Sarah's heart clenched with a mixture of fear and fierce pride. As they loaded him onto a horse, she memorized every detail, the direction they headed, the color and markings of their mounts, the way one gunman favored his left leg. Then she waited, counting to 500 before following. Tracking them in the darkness required all the skills she'd learned in her desperate flight. Stay downwind. Use the terrain. Don't skyline yourself against the horizon. Skills no proper lady should possess. But propriety had ceased to matter the night she'd fled Granger's house. They led her east, toward the old Vasquez mine, abandoned for years after the silver played out. Sarah's stomach knotted. The mine was isolated, honeycombed with shafts and tunnels, a perfect place to make someone disappear. She tethered Buttercup a half-mile out and continued on foot, grateful for the soft-soled boots that made little noise on the rocky ground. The mine buildings loomed against the stars, dark and forbidding. Light glowed from what had been the foreman's office. Creeping to a gap in the boards, Sarah peered inside. Ethan sat tied to a chair, his face pale but alert. Granger paced before him while the gunman lounged against the walls. "You're a stubborn fool, McCallum," Granger was saying. "All this for a servant girl, a nobody." "She's worth 10 of you," Ethan said through gritted teeth. Granger backhanded him casually. "Such passion. Tell me, have you bedded her yet, sampled what I've been denied?" "Go to hell." "I'll take that as a no." "Good. I prefer my women untouched." Granger's smile made Sarah's skin crawl. "When I find her, and I'll make sure she understands the price of defiance, thoroughly." Ethan lunged against his bonds, earning another blow that snapped his head sideways. "Boss," one of the gunmen interrupted. "Sun'll be up in a few hours. We should finish this." "Patience. Crawford. Our young friend here will talk. They always do." Granger produced a knife, testing its edge. "Let's start with something simple. Where is she?" "I told you, I don't know." The knife flashed. Ethan's sharp intake of breath told Sarah it had found its mark, though she couldn't see where from her angle. "Liar," Granger said conversationally. "You've been hiding her. My sources confirm that. Now, let's try again." Sarah backed away, her mind racing. 4 armed men, and Ethan wounded and bound. She needed help. But who the sheriff was in Granger's pocket? Ethan's father had washed his hands of the situation. Miguel, the young vaquero, had helped before, if she could find him. But that meant leaving Ethan at Granger's mercy. The thought tore at her, but charging in would only get them both killed. She needed a plan. As she crept back to Buttercup, a horse whinnied nearby. Sarah froze. Another rider, approaching from the west. She ducked behind a boulder as the horseman passed, one of Granger's men, from his outfit. But he was leading another horse, a familiar one. Duchess, Ethan's mare. An idea formed. Desperate. Probably foolish. But better than nothing. Sarah followed the gunman at a distance. He tied both horses with the others in a makeshift corral near the mine entrance, then headed inside, probably to report. Sarah waited until his footsteps faded, then slipped into the corral. The horses stirred restlessly, but didn't alarm. She'd always had a way with animals. Moving slowly, speaking softly, she untied their tethers one by one, all except Duchess, whom she led quietly away. Back where Buttercup waited, Sarah quickly switched her meager possessions to Ethan's mare. Duchess was faster, stronger, and most importantly, trained to respond to commands Ethan had taught her. "Sorry, old girl," she whispered to Buttercup. "But I need you to create a distraction." She pointed the patient mare toward the mine and gave her a sharp slap on the rump. Buttercup trotted forward obediently. Meanwhile, Sarah mounted Duchess and circled wide, approaching the mine from the opposite direction. Shouts erupted as someone discovered the loose horses. Men spilled from the building, cursing and trying to recapture their mounts in the pre-dawn darkness. In the confusion, Sarah slipped from Duchess and darted to the office window. Only one gunman remained inside with Ethan and Granger, and his attention was on the door, watching the chaos outside. Granger stood with his back to the window, still holding the bloodied knife. Sarah picked up a fist-sized rock. Not much of a weapon, but it would have to do. She eased through the door, moving like a shadow. The gunman saw her first. "Boss!" Sarah hurled the rock with all her strength. It caught him squarely in the temple, dropping him like a felled tree. Granger spun, his face shifting from surprise to ugly triumph. Well, the little bird returns to the cage. Sarah grabbed the fallen gunman's pistol, aiming it with shaking hands. "Cut him loose." "You won't."
shoot me." Granger stepped forward confidently. "You're not a killer. Sarah, just a frightened girl playing at being brave." "Cut him loose." Granger took another step. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. The gun boomed, the bullet whining past Granger's ear to shatter the lantern behind him. Oil splashed across the wooden wall, igniting instantly. "The next one won't miss," Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Granger's confidence cracked, with flames beginning to spread behind him. He moved to Ethan and cut the ropes. Ethan sagged forward, catching himself on the chair. "Now back away," Sarah ordered. Granger complied, but his eyes glittered dangerously. "You've just signed your death warrant, girl, both of you." "Sarah, behind you!" Ethan shouted. She spun as the other gunman burst through the door. Everything happened at once. Ethan launching himself at Granger, Sarah firing wildly, men shouting and flames roaring as the fire spread with frightening speed. A hand grabbed her wrist, twisting the gun away. Sarah drove her elbow back, hearing a satisfying grunt. Smoke filled the room, turning everything into a hellish confusion of shadows and fire. "The roof's coming down!" someone yelled. Sarah found Ethan in the chaos. He'd gotten Granger's gun and stood swaying, trying to cover their retreat. She grabbed his good arm, pulling him toward the door. They stumbled into the dawn light as the office collapsed behind them in a shower of sparks. The remaining gunmen had scattered, more concerned with escaping the inferno than pursuing fugitives. "Duchess!" Ethan gasped. "Where?" Sarah whistled sharply. The mare came running, eyes rolling white at the flames but obedient. Somehow they both managed to mount, Ethan clutching Sarah's waist as she took the reins. "Ride," he said hoarsely. "Don't stop!" Sarah kicked Duchess into a gallop, leaving the burning mine behind. But even over the thunder of hooves, she could hear Granger's voice raised in fury, promising retribution. They rode hard for an hour before Ethan's weight against her back became too heavy to ignore. She reined in beside a small stream, helping him dismount. In the growing light, she could see the damage, the gunshot wound in his shoulder still seeping blood, knife cuts on his arms, bruises darkening his jaw. "We need to get you to a doctor," she said, tearing strips from her petticoat for bandages. "No doctor. They'd have to report a gunshot wound." Ethan caught her hand as she worked. "Sarah, you came back. You were supposed to stay safe." "And let him kill you, never," she continued, wrapping his shoulder, blinking back tears. "This is my fault. All of it. Your cabin, your injury." "Hey," he tilted her chin up with his good hand. "I'd burn 100 cabins to keep you safe. The place never felt like home anyway. Not until you were in it." Despite everything, warmth bloomed in her chest. "Ethan McCallum, you pick the strangest times to be romantic." Near-death experiences tend to clarify things. His thumb brushed her cheek. "Marry me." Sarah's hand stilled. "What?" "Marry me. Today. Now. Before Granger regroups. Before my father interferes. Before anything else can tear us apart." "Ethan, you're delirious. Loss of blood." "I've never been more clear-headed." His eyes burned with intensity. "I love you. Sarah Bennett. I have since the moment I found you in my bed, looking like a defiant angel despite being terrified. These past days apart nearly killed me. And I don't mean the gunshot. Your father will disown you. You'll lose everything. I'll lose everything that doesn't matter and gain the only thing that does." He struggled to sit up straighter. Unless you don't feel the same." Sarah looked at this impossible man who'd sacrificed so much for her, who saw past the servant girl to the woman beneath, who made her feel brave and precious and loved. "You beautiful fool," she whispered. "Of course I feel the same." He kissed her then, desperate and tender despite his injuries. When they parted, both were breathless. "There's a mission church about 20 miles north," Ethan said. "Father Miguel performs marriages.
No questions asked. We could be there by noon. And you can barely sit a horse. I can manage if it means making you mine. He grinned, looking boyish despite the blood and bruises. Unless you'd prefer a society wedding, I'm sure Granger would love to give you away. Sarah laughed despite everything, or perhaps because of it. Here they were, fugitives with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a borrowed horse. And he was making jokes. Mission church it is, she said, though I hardly look like a bride. You look perfect. Ethan traced her face with wondering fingers. My brave, beautiful Sarah, my wife. Not yet, she corrected, helping him stand. Let's survive the next 20 miles first. They remounted Duchess, Sarah taking the reins again. As they rode north toward an uncertain future, she felt Ethan's arms tighten around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. No regrets, he murmured. Sarah thought of all she'd lost, her position, her reputation, any chance at a normal life. Then she thought of what she'd gained: love, freedom, and a man willing to burn the world for her. No regrets, she said firmly. Never. Behind them, smoke still rose from the mine. Ahead lay unknown territory, but with Ethan's heartbeat steady against her back and the sunrise painting the desert gold, Sarah Bennett felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. They had a long road ahead. Granger wouldn't give up easily, and there would be consequences for their choices. But for now, for this moment, they were together and free. It was enough. It was everything. The mission church of San Felipe stood like a weathered sentinel against the harsh landscape, its adobe walls baked golden by centuries of sun. Sarah helped Ethan dismount, alarmed by how heavily he leaned on her. The 20-mile ride had taken its toll. Fresh blood seeped through his makeshift bandages. Father Miguel, not to be confused with Ethan's friend, emerged from the shadowed doorway. The elderly priest took in their disheveled appearance with knowing eyes that had seen too much of human nature to be shocked by anything. My children, he said in accented English, you need help. We need marriage, Ethan said through gritted teeth. The help can come after. The priest's eyebrows rose. You are injured. My son, perhaps you should rest. Please, Father. Sarah stepped forward. We've come so far, we can't wait any longer. Something in her voice must have convinced him. Father Miguel nodded slowly. Come inside. We will need witnesses. The church interior was cool and dim, dust motes dancing in colored light from a single stained glass window. 2 Mexican women cleaning the altar agreed to serve as witnesses, their faces carefully neutral at the sight of the bloodied Anglo cowboy and the young woman in torn clothing. Do you have rings? Father Miguel asked. Sarah's heart sank. In their flight, such details hadn't mattered. But Ethan reached into his vest pocket with his good hand, producing a thin gold band. It was my mother's, he explained, pressing it into Sarah's palm. I've carried it since she died. Always thought, hoped, I'd give it to the woman I married. Tears blurred Sarah's vision. This man, bleeding and hunted, had kept his mother's ring through everything. The ceremony was brief, conducted in a mixture of Latin and English. Sarah barely heard the words, too focused on Ethan's face, pale but determined, his eyes never leaving hers. When Father Miguel asked if she took this man, her yes came out fierce and certain. You may kiss your bride, the priest said with a gentle smile. Ethan cupped her face with trembling fingers. The kiss was soft, almost reverent, but Sarah felt it through her entire being. When they parted, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. They were married, against all odds. Despite all obstacles, they belonged to each other now. The moment shattered as Ethan swayed. Sarah caught him as his knees buckled, lowering him carefully to a pew. Now, Father Miguel said briskly, we see to those wounds. What followed was a blur of activity. The priest, apparently well-versed in treating gunshot wounds. The territory is not always peaceful, he said by way of explanation, cleaned and properly bandaged Ethan's shoulder. Sarah held her new husband's hand as he bit down on a leather strap, fighting not to cry out. The bullet passed through cleanly, Father Miguel announced. God was watching over you, but you need rest, proper food. You cannot travel like this. We can't stay, Sarah said. The men hunting us will not violate sanctuary. The priest said firmly, This is God's house. You will be safe here for a time. He led them to a small room behind the church, sparse but clean, with a narrow bed and a crucifix on the wall. Ethan collapsed onto the bed with a groan of relief. I will bring food and water, Father Miguel said. Rest now. Alone with her husband, the words still felt strange and wonderful. Sarah perched on the bed's edge. Ethan caught her hand, threading their fingers together. Not quite the wedding night I imagined, he said with a weak smile. You imagined our wedding night, despite everything. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. From the moment I found you in my bed, his eyes darkened. Though, in my imagination, I wasn't bleeding and half dead from exhaustion. Ethan McCallum, you're scandalous. I'm your husband. I'm allowed to be scandalous now. The words sent a thrill through her. Husband? Hers. This brave, foolish, wonderful man had chosen her above everything else. A knock interrupted them. Sarah expected Father Miguel, but instead, a familiar figure slipped inside. Miguel, Ethan's friend, dusty from hard riding. Senor Ethan, thank God. The vaquero's relief was palpable. When we saw the cabin burned, and blood in the dirt. Takes more than Granger's hired guns to kill me, Ethan said, though his pallor suggested otherwise. Miguel's eyes moved to Sarah, taking in the way she sat close to Ethan, their joined hands. Senora, he said with a respectful nod that acknowledged the change in her status. What news from the ranch? Ethan asked. Miguel's face darkened. Your father. He is like a wounded bear. The sheriff came with questions about the fire. Senor McCallum told them he knew nothing, but... He shrugged expressively. But everyone knows better. Si, and there is more. The newspaper man in town, he is dead. Sarah gasped. Dead how? They say his heart gave out, but bruises on his throat tell a different story. Miguel's jaw tightened. The story about the witness. It will never be printed now. And Bessie Washington? Sarah asked, though she feared the answer. No sign. Some say she took the train east. Others say... He didn't finish, but they all knew what others said. Granger had silenced anyone who could clear Sarah's name. The injustice of it burned like acid in her chest. There's something else, Miguel continued reluctantly. Granger, he has put out word. $500 for the girl's return. $1,000 if you are brought in too. Ethan, every bounty hunter in 3 territories will be looking... Ethan struggled to sit up. We need to leave. Head for California. You cannot ride, Miguel said flatly. Not for days, maybe weeks. That shoulder. I can't just lie here while you heal, Sarah interrupted firmly. Dead heroes are no use to anyone. Ethan. He glared at her, but she met his gaze steadily. After a moment, he subsided with a muttered curse. I brought supplies, Miguel said, producing a worn saddlebag. Food, ammunition, some money, and this. He handed Sarah a folded paper. She opened it to find a wanted poster. Her own face stared back, a reasonable likeness despite being drawn from description. Wanted for theft and moral corruption. Sarah Bennett, $500 reward. Moral corruption, Ethan snarled. That bastard. Easy, hermano. Miguel gripped his good shoulder. Save your strength for healing. You will need it. A commotion outside cut him short. Horses, many of them, and raised voices. Sarah moved to the small window, peering out carefully. Sheriff Hale sat his horse in the mission courtyard, flanked by 6 armed men. Beside him, still dressed in city finery despite the dust, rode Thomas Granger. "Father Miguel," Granger called. "We know they're here. Send them out, and we'll leave your church in peace." The elderly priest emerged, moving with quiet dignity. "This is holy ground. Senor, you have no authority here." "I have all the authority I need." Hale produced a paper. Territorial warrant for Sarah Bennett and Ethan McCallum. Charges of theft, arson, and attempted murder.
Attempted murder?
Sarah breathed.
We never...
"One of his men from the mine," Miguel guessed. "They will say whatever Granger pays them to say. Even holy ground can't protect criminals forever," Granger added, his voice carrying clearly. "Give them up, priest, or things will become unpleasant." Father Miguel stood straighter.
"I cannot give up what I do not have."
"Search the church," Hale ordered.
"You would violate sanctuary."
The priest's voice carried quiet authority that made several riders shift uneasily.
"You would bring violence to God's house."
"We're searching for dangerous fugitives," Hale said, but he sounded less certain.
"The only danger here is to men's souls who would persecute the innocent."
Father Miguel raised his voice so all could hear.
"I know Thomas Granger. I know what kind of man he is.
What he does to young women in his employ.
As do many of you."
Several of the riders looked uncomfortable now. Granger's face flushed dark red.
"Careful, priest. Your church survives on the charity of men like me."
"Better to serve God in poverty than the devil in comfort." Father Miguel turned to address the mounted men. "Go home. Do not stain your souls with innocent blood for the sake of gold." For a moment, the standoff held. Then one rider wheeled his horse around.
"I didn't sign up to raid churches,"
he muttered, spurring away. 2 others followed. "Get back here," Hale roared. But the damage was done. Doubt had been planted. Granger leaned forward in his saddle.
"This isn't over, priest. You can't protect them forever. And when they leave, when they have to run, I'll be waiting."
He jerked his horse around savagely. The remaining men followed, leaving dust and tension in their wake.
Sarah sagged against the wall. "That was too close."
"Father Miguel has courage," Miguel said admiringly. "But Granger speaks truth. You cannot stay here forever." "I know." Ethan's voice was grim. "We need a plan, some way to prove Sarah's innocence."
"Bessie Washington," Sarah said suddenly. "She's the key. If she's alive, if we could find her—"
"A big if," Miguel pointed out.
"She could be anywhere, or nowhere."
"But worth trying," Ethan said.
"Miguel, can you ask around quietly? Someone must have seen something."
"Say, I will try, but carefully. Granger has eyes everywhere now." He moved to the door. "Rest, both of you. I will return when I know more." After he left, Sarah helped Ethan lie back down. The brief excitement had exhausted him. His face was gray with pain and fatigue.
"Sleep," she urged. "You need to heal."
"Stay with me." "Always." She stretched out beside him carefully, mindful of his injuries. Despite the narrow bed, despite the danger surrounding them, she felt a moment of perfect peace.
"Sarah McCallum,"
Ethan murmured against her hair.
"I like how that sounds."
"So do I." She pressed closer, feeling his heartbeat against her palm.
"So do I."
Outside, the sun climbed toward its zenith. They were hunted, homeless, with few allies and fewer options. But they were together, bound by law and love and shared determination. In the quiet sanctuary of the mission church, that was enough. The next days passed in a strange, suspended state. Ethan's fever rose and broke, leaving him weak but clear-headed. Sarah tended him with fierce devotion, barely leaving his side. Father Miguel proved a godsend, not just with medical care, but with quiet wisdom and unexpected humor.
"You remind me of another couple," he said one evening, bringing them simple food. "Many years ago, also running, also very much in love. They stayed here 2 weeks before continuing to Mexico." "What happened to them?" Sarah asked. The priest smiled. "Last I heard, they had 7 children and a successful ranch in Sonora. Love finds a way, child, even in the darkest times."
But darker times were coming. On the 4th day, Miguel returned with troubling news. "I found someone who saw Bessie Washington," he reported. "She took the stage east, but only to the next town. She was persuaded to return."
Sarah's heart sank. "Granger has her?" "Had her. She was seen at his house 2 days ago."
"Now?" Miguel shrugged helplessly. "No one knows."
"She could be dead," Ethan said flatly.
"Or hidden. Granger is not stupid. A dead witness could become a martyr, but a frightened one, kept close." Miguel's expression was grim. "She could be made to say anything."
"We have to find her," Sarah insisted.
"She's our only hope of proving the truth."
"It's suicide," Ethan countered.
"Granger's house is a fortress now. He's hired more men, posted guards. We'd never get close."
"Then we make him come to us," Sarah said slowly, an idea forming. "He wants me, badly. What if we use that?" "Absolutely not." Ethan's voice was sharp.
"I won't use you as bait."
"You won't be using me. I'll be choosing to act." She faced him squarely. "I'm tired of running. Ethan, tired of being the victim. It's time to fight back." "Sarah."
"No." Her voice carried new steel.
"You've bled for me, nearly died for me. Now let me take my turn being brave."
They argued for an hour, but Sarah held firm. Finally, grudgingly, they began to plan. It would be dangerous, perhaps foolhardy, but it was better than waiting for Granger to find them. As night fell over the mission, Sarah stood at the window, watching stars emerge in the desert sky. Tomorrow. They would act tomorrow, one way or another. This would end. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his good arm around her waist. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing their wedding morning. Sarah leaned back into his warmth.
"None. Whatever happens, these days with you have been worth everything."
He kissed her temple. "It's not over yet. We're going to win this. Together." Together. In the darkness beyond the mission walls, she knew their enemies waited. But here, in this moment, in the circle of her husband's arms, Sarah McCallum felt no fear, only determination. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Sarah would send word to Granger, offering to meet him alone at the old Riverside trading post neutral ground, away from town, but not so isolated that he'd suspect a trap. She would claim exhaustion, a willingness to negotiate. Meanwhile, Ethan and Miguel would infiltrate Granger's house to find Bessie Washington. "I still don't like it," Ethan said for the 100th time as they prepared to leave the mission. His shoulder was better but still stiff, the movement limited.
"Your likes and dislikes are noted. Husband,"
Sarah replied, checking the small derringer Father Miguel had provided. The priest had surprised them all with his practical assistance. Apparently, frontier clergy learned to balance spiritual and worldly concerns. Miguel arrived at dusk with fresh horses and disturbing news. "Granger has moved Bessie to the old root cellar behind his house. I spoke to the Mexican girl who brings her food. She is alive but terrified."
"Guards?" Ethan asked. "2 at the house, one who checks the cellar every few hours. But they will be fewer when Granger leaves to meet Sarah."
"Or more if he suspects a trap," Sarah pointed out. "He won't." Ethan's jaw tightened.
"His arrogance is his weakness. He truly believes you'll eventually submit, that you have no choice."
Sarah kissed him fiercely.
"Then let's prove him wrong."
They parted at the crossroads. Sarah riding toward Riverside while the men headed for town. Every instinct screamed at Ethan to follow his wife. but he forced himself to trust her strength. The trading post sat beside a meandering creek, its adobe walls crumbling but solid enough to provide cover. Sarah arrived first, as planned, tying her horse where it could be seen from the road. Her heart hammered as she entered the musty interior, dust motes dancing in shafts of late afternoon light. She didn't have long to wait. The rumble of approaching horses sent her to the window. Granger rode in front, flanked by Sheriff Hale and 2 gunmen. Not the army she'd feared, but enough to make her palms sweat. Mrs. McCallum. Granger's voice carried false joviality as he dismounted. Or should I say, Miss Bennett? After all, marriages performed by Mexican priests hardly count. Sarah stepped into the doorway, head high. The marriage is legal, and you know it. Perhaps, though legality seems a flexible concept for you. He moved closer, his men spreading out to flank the building. You look tired, my dear. This outlaw life doesn't suit you. What do you want? Granger. What I've always wanted. You. His mask of civility slipped, revealing the predator beneath. Though you've complicated things considerably, my reputation has suffered. The whole territory knows you ran rather than accept my protection. Your reputation was built on lies and intimidation. I simply revealed the truth. His hand cracked across her face, the blow sending her stumbling. Careful, girl. My patience has limits. Sarah tasted blood but kept her feet. As does mine. Brave words for someone outnumbered 4-1. Granger stepped closer, backing her into the building. Where's your husband? Abandoned you already? He's pursuing other matters. Something in her tone made Granger's eyes narrow. What other matters? Sarah allowed a small smile. Did you really think we'd give up, that we'd run forever without fighting back? If you're referring to that newspaper fool or the Washington woman, those matters have been resolved. Have they? Sarah played her card. Because I heard Bessie made it to the federal marshal in Santa Fe, told quite a story about stolen money and false accusations. Granger went very still. Behind him, Hale shifted uneasily. You're lying. Am I? Why do you think I'm really here? Granger. To surrender. She laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. I'm here to give you one last chance. Leave the territory, tonight, or face federal investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and murder. You little... He grabbed her throat, slamming her against the wall. Where is she? Where's the Washington woman? Somewhere you'll never find her, Sarah gasped out. Boss? One of the gunmen appeared in the doorway. Rider coming fast from town. Granger released her. Striding outside, Sarah followed, rubbing her bruised throat. A lone horseman approached in a cloud of dust. Crawford, one of Granger's men from the mine. They're at your house, Crawford shouted, not even dismounting. McCallum and that Mexican. They broke in through the back. Jenkins is down, maybe dead. Granger's face went purple with rage. He spun on Sarah. You scheming witch! This was all a diversion. Did you really think I'd come alone and helpless? Sarah backed toward her horse. You taught me better than that. Thomas, you taught me that the weak get crushed. So I decided to stop being weak. Stop her! Granger roared. But Sarah was already moving, diving behind a water trough as bullets shattered the air where she'd been. She rolled, came up running, and vaulted onto her horse with a skill born of desperation. After her, Granger screamed. Bring her back alive. I want to deal with her personally. Sarah bent low over the saddle, urging her mount to greater speed. Behind her, hoofbeats thundered in pursuit. The plan had worked too well. She'd enraged Granger enough to follow, but now she had to stay alive long enough for Ethan to complete his part. A bullet whined past her ear. Sarah veered sharply. Using every trick Ethan had taught her about riding, the creek ran parallel to her path. She suddenly plunged down the bank, water exploding around the horse's legs. The pursuit faltered momentarily at the unexpected move. Sarah used the precious seconds to splash upstream, then cut back inland through a grove of cottonwoods. If she could reach the rocky ground near the mesa. Her horse stumbled, nearly throwing her. Sarah caught herself, but the animal was limping now, favoring its right foreleg. Behind her, the hunters closed in. No choice. Sarah dismounted, slapping the horse's rump to send it running, then scrambled up the loose scree of the mesa's lower slopes. On foot, she might find cover the horses couldn't follow. "There!" someone shouted. "She's climbing!" Sarah's breath came in burning gasps as she climbed. A bullet sparked off rocks inches from her hand. Another tugged at her skirt. Then she was over a ridge, momentarily out of sight. A narrow deer trail led along the mesa's face. Sarah followed it, trying to ignore the dizzying drop to her left. Behind her, boots scraped on stone as her pursuers climbed after her. The trail ended at a shallow cave, really just an overhang of rock. Sarah pressed herself into the deepest shadows, gripping the derringer. 2 shots, that's all she had. "Come out, Sarah," Granger's voice echoed off the rocks. "You're trapped. No more running." She stayed silent, watching the trail. A figure appeared, not Granger, but one of his men, rifle ready. He peered into the shadows. Sarah fired. The man cried out, clutching his shoulder as he stumbled backward. For one heart-stopping moment, he teetered on the trail's edge, then fell with a scream that cut off abruptly. "Damn you," Granger appeared, his own gun drawn. "That's 2 of my men you've cost me." "Stay back," Sarah warned, aiming the derringer with her last shot. "1 bullet left, if I counted right." Granger smiled coldly. "And you're not a killer." "Sarah, not really. That shot was meant to wound, not kill." He was right. Curse him. Even in desperation, she'd aimed for the shoulder, not the heart. "But I am a killer," Granger continued, advancing slowly. "I've killed before, and will again, starting with your husband when I get back to town." No, the word tore from her throat. "Oh yes, slowly, painfully. While you watch, that's the price of defiance, my dear." Sarah's hand shook. 1 shot, make it count. But Granger was right. She wasn't a killer, and he knew it. Then, impossibly, she heard it. Hoofbeats, many of them, approaching fast. Granger heard it too, turning to look. "Federal Marshal." The voice carried clearly on the desert air. "Thomas Granger, you're under arrest." Granger spun back to Sarah, face twisted with fury. "You weren't lying. The Washington woman is safe and talking," Sarah finished, "along with 3 other women willing to testify about your employment practices. It's over, Thomas." "Not yet," he snarled, raising his gun. Sarah fired her last shot. This time, she didn't aim to wound. The derringer's small bullet took Granger in the chest, sending him staggering. His gun discharged harmlessly into the air as he fell to his knees. "You—" He stared at her in shock. "You actually—" "I told you I was done being weak," Sarah said quietly. Thomas Granger toppled forward and lay still. Sarah stood frozen, the empty derringer falling from nerveless fingers. She'd killed a man. Self-defense. Yes, but the weight of it pressed on her chest like stones. "Sarah." Ethan's voice. She looked down to see him dismounting below, federal marshals spreading out behind him. His arm was in a proper sling now, but he climbed with desperate determination. "I'm here," she called, her voice barely working. "I'm all right." But when he reached her, when he pulled her into his embrace, she finally broke. Sobs shook her frame as the terror and adrenaline and awful finality of what she'd done crashed over her. "It's over," Ethan murmured, holding her tight. "You're safe. We're safe. It's over." "I killed him?" she whispered. "I actually killed him. To save yourself. To save us." He pulled back to cup her face, forcing her to meet his eyes.
You did what you had to do. No guilt, Sarah, no regrets.
She nodded shakily, drawing strength from his certainty. Around them, the marshals were dealing with Granger's body and his surviving men. Sheriff Hale, she noted with grim satisfaction, was in manacles.
Bessie? She asked. Safe. We got her out just as Granger's men realized what was happening. She's with the marshals now, telling everything. Ethan's smile was fierce with pride.
Your plan worked perfectly.
Our plan, she corrected. Then, how did the marshals get here so fast? That would be my doing.
They turned to see Samuel McCallum climbing the trail, breathing hard but dignity intact. Ethan stiffened, but his father raised a peaceful hand. I've been a fool, Samuel said simply, and a coward. When Miguel told me what you were planning, I realized I had a choice. Stand with my son or lose him forever.
Father.
Let me finish. Samuel's weathered face showed uncharacteristic emotion. I sent word to the federal office 3 days ago, told them everything I knew about Granger's activities, things I'd ignored for too long because it was easier, because he was powerful. He met Sarah's eyes. I owe you an apology. Young woman, you showed more courage than I ever have. Sarah didn't trust her voice, so she simply nodded. The ranch is yours. Ethan. Samuel continued, both of you. I'll be moving to the house in town. It's time I stepped aside. Let the next generation take over. A ghost of a smile crossed his stern features. Besides, I expect grandchildren eventually. They'll need room to run.
Father,
Ethan seemed at a loss for words. Samuel gripped his son's good shoulder. Your mother would be proud of you, proud of both of you, as am I. The reunion was interrupted by a marshal climbing up to them. Mrs. McCallum, we'll need your statement about what happened here.
Of course, Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded now. But first, I'd like to go home with my husband.
Home, Ethan repeated, wonder in his voice.
Yes, let's go home.
As they made their way down the mesa, Sarah looked back once at where Thomas Granger had fallen. The man who'd terrorized her, who'd driven her to run, who'd taken so much from so many, was gone. She felt no satisfaction, only a weary relief. No regrets, Ethan asked softly. Following her gaze, Sarah turned to face forward, toward the future they'd fought so hard to claim. No regrets, she said firmly.
Never again.
The sun was setting as they rode back toward town, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah rode beside her husband, their hands occasionally touching across the space between horses. Behind them rode Samuel McCallum and the federal marshals. Ahead lay home, not just a place, but a life they'd chosen, fought for, and won. The nightmare was over. The rest of their lives could finally begin. The courtroom in Santa Fe was packed to capacity, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of too many bodies in too small a space. Sarah sat straight-backed in the witness chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap despite the churning in her stomach. Across the room, Sheriff Hale glowered from the defendant's table, flanked by 2 federal guards. Mrs. McCallum, the prosecutor began. Please tell the court about your employment with Thomas Granger.
Sarah's voice came out steady and clear. I worked as a housemaid for 2 years. The first year, when Mrs. Granger was alive, was pleasant. After her death, things changed. How so?
Mr. Granger began making unwelcome advances. When I refused, he became angry. He said I was putting on airs, that I should be grateful for his attention. And the theft he accused you of?
Never happened.
Sarah met Hale's glare without flinching.
I believe Mr. Granger took the money himself to have a legal hold over me, to prevent me from leaving.
The testimony continued for 2 hours. Sarah detailed her flight, the pursuit, the burning of Ethan's cabin, When she described the confrontation at the mine, several spectators gasped at the brutality. "The defense may cross-examine," the judge intoned. Hale's lawyer stood, a thin man with predatory eyes. "Mrs. McCallum, isn't it true that you shot and killed Thomas Granger?" "Yes," Sarah said simply. "In self-defense, after he threatened to kill my husband and raised his gun to shoot me." "How convenient that the only witness to this alleged self-defense is dead." "Objection," the prosecutor called. "The witness's account has been corroborated by physical evidence and the testimony of the federal marshals who arrived immediately after." Sustained. The defense lawyer changed tactics. "You lived in Ethan McCallum's cabin for several days before your marriage." "Correct." "Yes." "Sharing his bed." Sarah's chin lifted. "I slept in the bed. He slept in the main room. Nothing improper occurred." "So you say, but a young woman alone with a man, unchaperoned, is irrelevant to the charges against Sheriff Hale." The judge interrupted sharply. "Counselor, stick to the matter at hand or I'll hold you in contempt." When Sarah finally stepped down, Ethan was waiting. He caught her hand, squeezing gently, and she drew strength from his touch. Bessie Washington took the stand next. The former cook had aged years in weeks, her dark face drawn with strain, but her voice rang with conviction as she testified. "I saw Mr. Granger take that money from his own strongbox," she stated. "Saw him put it in Miss Sarah's room with my own eyes. When I tried to speak up, he said he'd have me whipped as a thief too. Said no one would believe a colored woman over him." "Why come forward now?" the prosecutor asked gently. "Because wrong is wrong," Bessie said firmly. "And that girl never did nothing but work hard and try to stay decent. When I heard what all happened, how far Mr. Granger went trying to hurt her, I couldn't stay quiet no more." The defense's attempts to discredit Bessie fell flat. Her dignity and obvious honesty won over the jury, as did the testimony of 3 other women who came forward with their own stories of Granger's abuse of power. By the time Sheriff Hale himself took the stand, the outcome seemed inevitable. His story contradicted itself multiple times. When pressed about the money Granger had paid him, he grew flustered and angry. "That girl bewitched the McCallum boy," he finally burst out. "Made him throw away everything for a piece of—" The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "That's enough, Sheriff Hale. You will control yourself or be removed from this courtroom." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, abuse of power, attempted murder. Hale would spend the next 20 years in federal prison. As the courtroom emptied, Sarah felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. Justice had been served, but it couldn't undo the fear, the pain, the loss of innocence. "How are you holding up?" Ethan asked softly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought I'd feel more vindicated. Maybe. Instead, I just feel tired." "That's natural." The voice belonged to Samuel McCallum, who'd attended every day of the trial. "Victory after battle often feels hollow, but give it time. Peace will come." Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Sarah tensed, but the faces were friendly, supportive. Several women reached out to touch her arm as she passed, murmuring words of encouragement. "You've become something of a hero," Samuel observed, "a woman who stood up to power and won." "I'm no hero," Sarah protested. "I just wanted to survive." "Sometimes that's the most heroic thing of all," Ethan said. They returned to the ranch the next day, traveling in comfortable silence. The McCallum spread stretched before them in the afternoon sun, vast and golden and theirs. The main house, where Samuel had lived for decades, would be their home now. "It's so big," Sarah murmured as they approached. "You'll grow into it," Samuel assured her. "This land has a way of expanding people to fit it." Miguel met them at the door, his face split by a huge grin. "Welcome home, Senor. Senora the house. She is ready for you." Indeed, the place had been transformed. Fresh curtains at the windows, flowers on the tables. The masculine severity softened without losing its strength. In the master bedroom, Sarah found her few possessions from the cabin already unpacked, looking small but precious in the large space. The women from town, they came to help, Miguel explained. Said you deserved a proper welcome. Sarah blinked back tears. After weeks of being hunted and hated, this acceptance felt overwhelming. That evening, they gathered for dinner in the formal dining room. Sarah, Ethan, Samuel, and Miguel, who Ethan insisted join them despite his protests about propriety. To new beginnings. Samuel raised his glass. And to the courage to fight for them. To family, Ethan added, his eyes on Sarah. Both born and chosen. To justice, Sarah contributed quietly. And to those brave enough to speak truth. To love, Miguel finished with a romantic sigh that made everyone laugh. Because what is life without it? They drank, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah truly relaxed. This was her life now, this man, this place, these people. It seemed impossible, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. Later, as she and Ethan prepared for bed in their new room, she voiced her fears. What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't know how to be a rancher's wife? Ethan pulled her close. You faced down Thomas Granger and survived. You outsmarted bounty hunters and won over a federal jury. I think you can handle a few cattle and social calls. When you put it that way, she smiled against his chest. Though I know nothing about cattle. I'll teach you, just like you taught me about courage. I didn't teach you that. You had it all along. Maybe, but you showed me what was worth being brave for. He tilted her chin up. I love you, Sarah McCallum. From that first night when I found you in my bed, looking fierce and frightened and absolutely magnificent. Even then, especially then, though I fought it for all of 3 days before giving in completely. Sarah laughed, remembering those first tense days that felt like a lifetime ago. I love you too, even when you were grumpy about me borrowing your bed. Our bed now, he corrected, and proceeded to demonstrate exactly how much he appreciated sharing it with his wife. The next morning, Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of activity outside. Ethan was already up, standing at the window watching the ranch come alive. What do we do now? She asked, joining him. We've been running and fighting for so long. I don't know how to just live. We learn, he said simply. Together, we build something worth having on this land. We raise cattle and children and hell when necessary. He grinned at her expression. Not necessarily in that order. Children. Her hand went unconsciously to her stomach. Eventually, when you're ready, when we've had time to just be us for a while. Sarah leaned into his warmth. I like that plan. A knock at the door interrupted them. Senor Ethan, there is a woman here to see the senora. She says it is important. They found Bessie Washington in the front parlor, looking uncomfortable but determined. She rose when Sarah entered. Bessie, it's so good to see you. Please, sit. Would you like some coffee? No, thank you, ma'am. I can't stay long. I just wanted to... She paused, choosing her words carefully. I wanted to thank you, and to apologize for not speaking up sooner. You have nothing to apologize for, Sarah said firmly. You risked everything to tell the truth. I'm the one who should thank you. Well, that's just it. Bessie reached into her bag, producing a small, wrapped package. This belonged to Mrs. Granger. She gave it to me before she died. Said to keep it safe. I think she knew what her husband was. I want you to have it. Sarah unwrapped the package carefully, gasping at what lay inside. A silver locket on a delicate chain, engraved with tiny flowers. Inside were 2 miniature paintings, a young couple clearly in love. That's Mrs. Granger and her first husband.
Bessie explained. Before he died in the war, she said it reminded her that love was possible, even when life turned dark. I can't accept this, Sarah protested. You can and you will. Bessie's tone brooked no argument. She would have wanted someone who understood to have it, someone who fought for love instead of settling for convenience. Sarah's eyes misted. Thank you. I'll treasure it. There's one more thing. Bessie stood, smoothing her skirts. I'm leaving for Philadelphia tomorrow. My sister lives there, and I've had enough of the frontier, but before I go, I wanted you to know you changed things here, made it possible for women like us to say no. That matters. After Bessie left, Sarah stood holding the locket, overwhelmed by the gesture and its meaning. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. You all right? Yes, she turned in his embrace. Just thinking about how many lives intersected to bring us here. Mrs. Granger, who hired me, Bessie, who spoke up, your father, who chose love over pride, even Granger himself, whose cruelty drove me to your cabin that night. Fate, Ethan suggested. Choice, Sarah countered. 1,000 small choices that led to one perfect moment. Speaking of choices, Ethan grew serious. There's something I need to discuss with you. Father suggested we host a gathering next month. Invite the neighboring ranchers, the town officials, properly introduce you as my wife and the new mistress of the ranch. Sarah's stomach nodded. A society gathering, Ethan. I don't know how. You'll be magnificent. He interrupted. But if you're not ready, we'll wait. This is your home. Sarah, you decide when and how to claim it publicly. She thought of all the women who'd touched her arm outside the courthouse, who'd prepared this house for her arrival. Thought of Bessie's words about changing things, making it possible to say no. I'll do it, she decided. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. This is my life now. Our life. I won't hide from it. That's my brave girl. Ethan kissed her soundly. Now come on. Time you learn to ride the range properly. Can't have the boss's wife not knowing one end of a cow from the other. Boss, Sarah laughed as he tugged her toward the door. I thought this was a partnership. It is. You're the boss of the house. I'm the boss of the cattle. And we're both boss of our own destiny. I like that arrangement, Sarah said, following him into the bright morning sun. The land stretched before them, vast and challenging and full of promise. There would be hard times ahead, droughts and storms, market crashes and personal losses. But there would also be joy, children's laughter filling the house, successful harvests, quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset. Most importantly, they would face it all together. The rancher's son who'd found love by accident, and the woman who'd chosen to burn bright rather than fade away. Their story, born of fear and injustice, had transformed into something stronger, a love that could weather any storm. As they rode out to survey their domain, Sarah touched the locket at her throat and smiled. Mrs. Granger had been right. Love was possible, even when life turned dark. Especially then. 5 years had passed since that fateful night in the old cabin. The McCallum Ranch had prospered under Ethan and Sarah's management, becoming one of the most successful spreads in the territory. The house rang with new sounds now, children's laughter, the patter of small feet, the gentle chaos of a growing family. Sarah stood on the wide porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. In the yard, 3-year-old Thomas played with his wooden horses while baby Elizabeth slept in the cradle beside her mother's chair. The names had been Ethan's choice. Thomas for his mother's father, a good man who'd died young, and Elizabeth for Sarah's own mother. Barely remembered but deeply missed. Mama, look. Thomas held up his toys. They're racing like Papa's horses. Very fast. Sarah agreed, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. He had Ethan's dark hair but her blue eyes,
a combination that already promised to break hearts someday. The sound of approaching horses drew her attention. Ethan rode in with Miguel and several hands, dusty from a day of moving cattle to fresh pasture. Even after 5 years, her heart still skipped when she saw him, broader now with full maturity, lines beginning to show around his eyes from sun and laughter, but still the man who'd chosen her above everything. "There's my family," he called, dismounting with the easy grace of a lifetime horseman. Thomas immediately abandoned his toys to run to his father, who swung him up onto his shoulders.
"Papa, I helped Mama today, fed the chickens all by myself."
"Did you now? That's my big boy." Ethan kissed Sarah, lingering despite their audience. "And how's our princess?"
"Sleeping. Finally, she has your stubbornness about schedules."
"My stubbornness?" Ethan grinned.
"I seem to recall someone who faced down bounty hunters and refused to back down."
"That was determination, not stubbornness," Sarah corrected primly, though her eyes danced with humor. Miguel chuckled. "Heading for the bunkhouse. Same fire, different name. Senora." As the hands dispersed, Samuel emerged from the house. The elder McCallum spent most of his time in town now, but visited weekly, unable to resist his grandchildren's pull. "There's a letter for you," he told Sarah, producing an envelope. "From Philadelphia." Sarah recognized Bessie's careful handwriting immediately. She opened it eagerly, scanning the contents while Ethan settled Thomas with his grandfather and checked on Elizabeth. "What news?" Ethan asked, noting her expression.
"Bessie's getting married," Sarah said wonderingly. "To a shopkeeper, a widower with 2 children. She says she had never expected to find love at her age, but life had surprises left after all. Good for her. She deserves happiness. She also says—" Sarah's voice caught. "She's naming her new daughter Sarah. If we don't mind. Says I showed her that courage comes in many forms." Ethan pulled her close. "You show everyone that love every day."
That evening, after the children were asleep and Samuel had retired to the guest room, Sarah and Ethan sat on their bedroom's small balcony. It had become their nightly ritual, a moment of peace to reconnect after busy days. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, nestled against his side,
"about opening a school. A school
for the ranch children, and any from town whose parents can't afford the academy. Reading, writing, basic arithmetic, maybe sewing and cooking for the girls who want to learn." She twisted to see his face. "Would that be all right?" "It's a wonderful idea. Though when would you have time between the children, the house, the ranch accounts?" "I'd hire help. Maybe that young woman from town, Miss Patterson. She has education but no prospects since her father died." Ethan kissed her temple. "Still saving people, aren't you?" "Not saving, just opening doors. The way doors were opened for me."
"Then do it.
God knows this territory needs more educated children." He paused. "Speaking of children—"
"Ethan McCallum, 2 is enough for now," Sarah said firmly. "Let me get Elizabeth walking before you start planning more."
"I was actually going to say Thomas asked me today why his name is different from his cousins in town. Samuel's brother's boy." Sarah sighed. They'd known this day would come.
"What did you tell him?" "That names are just words. That what matters is the love that shapes us."
Ethan's voice grew thoughtful.
"He's too young to understand the full story now. But someday
we'll tell him how his parents found each other. How sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." Sarah smiled softly.
"How his father chose love over everything else. And his mother learned to be brave."
"You were always brave. You just needed the chance to show it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the vast sky. In the distance, a coyote called, answered by another. The sounds of the ranch settled into nighttime rhythms, horses shuffling in their stalls, the windmill creaking gently, the ever-present whisper of wind through grass. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't run that night?" Ethan asked. If you'd never come to my cabin,
Sometimes, Sarah admitted, but not with regret. Every path led here to you, to our children, to this life. I wouldn't change a single step. Even the fear, the pain. Especially those, they taught me my own strength. She turned in his arms. And they brought me you. Worth any price. A cry from the nursery interrupted them. Elizabeth, awake and demanding attention. Sarah started to rise, but Ethan pressed her back.
I'll go. You rest.
She watched him leave. This man who'd grown from a constrained rancher's son into a confident father and leader. The boy who'd found a desperate woman in his bed had become someone who knew exactly who he was and what mattered. When he returned with Elizabeth, the baby reaching for her mother with chubby arms, Sarah felt that familiar surge of completeness. This was what they'd fought for. What they'd risked everything to claim. Not just survival, but life in all its messy, beautiful fullness.
She's hungry, Ethan reported, handing over their daughter.
As Sarah settled to nurse, Ethan sat beside them, one arm around his wife, his free hand gently stroking his daughter's downy hair. In the nursery, Thomas slept peacefully, probably dreaming of horses and adventures. "Thank you," Sarah said suddenly. "For what?" "For seeing me that night, not just a servant or a fugitive or a problem to be solved. For seeing me."
"Thank you,"
Ethan countered. "For being worth seeing, for choosing to trust a stranger, for teaching me that love isn't about what's safe or expected." We taught each other. Sarah decided, and we're still learning. Good thing we have a lifetime to practice. Elizabeth finished nursing, milk drunk and content. Sarah passed her to Ethan, who expertly settled her against his shoulder for burping. Watching them, Sarah marveled at how natural he was as a father, how gentle those work-roughened hands could be. "I love our life," she said simply. "Even when Thomas tracks mud through the house and Elizabeth keeps us up all night. Especially then. It means we're living, not just surviving." Later, after Elizabeth was back in her cradle and they were settled in their own bed, Sarah lay awake despite her fatigue. Through the window, she could see the spot where Ethan's old cabin had stood. They'd never rebuilt it, leaving the land to heal naturally. Now, wildflowers grew there in spring, a riot of color from ashes. "Can't sleep," Ethan murmured, pulling her closer. "Just thinking about how that cabin burned, but what it held, what we found there, survived. More than survived, flourished. Like those wildflowers, beauty from destruction." Very poetic for... He checked the clock. 2 a.m. Sarah laughed softly. "Sorry. Sometimes the old fears creep in. Like if I close my eyes, I'll wake up and this will all have been a dream." "Want me to prove it's real?" His hand traced patterns on her skin, familiar and thrilling at once. "Ethan, the children are sleeping, and their parents deserve some attention too." Sarah turned in his arms, meeting his kiss with equal passion. 5 years of marriage hadn't dimmed the fire between them. If anything, it burned brighter for being tended with daily acts of love and choice. When they finally settled to sleep, tangled together in the pre-dawn quiet, Sarah's last thought was of that scared girl who'd stumbled into a stranger's cabin. She'd been running from one life, only to collide headlong into another, one filled with more joy and purpose than she'd ever dared imagine. The next morning brought the usual cheerful chaos. Thomas spilled his milk at breakfast. Elizabeth decided to practice her newly discovered squealing abilities. And one of the ranch dogs somehow got into the kitchen and made off with a ham. Through it all, Sarah moved with practiced calm, directing cleanup efforts while Ethan tried unsuccessfully to look stern with Thomas. "In Mrs. McCallum." Young Mary Patterson stood in the doorway, having arrived for their meeting about the school. "Should I come back?" "Nonsense. Welcome to a typical morning at the McCallum house." Sarah handed Elizabeth to the girl. Would you mind? I need to catch that dog before he eats our lunch too."
By the time order was restored, Mary was completely charmed by Elizabeth and tentatively discussing lesson plans with Sarah. They would start small, a one-room schoolhouse near the main barn, with classes 3 days a week.
"We'll teach them to read and write, of course,"
Sarah explained.
"but also to think, to question, to dream beyond what they see."
That's revolutionary. Mrs. McCallum," Mary said carefully.
"Some might say dangerous, especially for the girls."
"Good," Sarah said firmly.
"The world needs more dangerous women. Women who won't accept being property or victims."
Mary's eyes shone.
"When do we start?"
As they planned, Ethan took Thomas out to see the new foals. Sarah watched from the window as her son's face lit up at the gangly babies, his small hand gentle as he petted them under his father's guidance.
"Your husband is good with him,"
Mary observed.
"He's a good man,"
Sarah agreed. "The best I know. You're lucky, Mrs. McCallum, to have found such love." Sarah touched the locket at her throat. Mrs. Granger's gift still worn daily as reminder and talisman. "Not found," she corrected gently. "Chosen, fought for. Love isn't luck. Mary, it's decision after decision to put someone else's happiness equal to your own."
"I hope to have that someday,"
Mary said wistfully.
"You will. Just remember, you're worth fighting for, too."
Never settle for less than someone who sees that. That afternoon, while the children napped, Sarah walked to the small cemetery on the hill behind the house. 3 headstones stood there. Ethan's mother, a ranch hand who died in a riding accident, and a small marker for the baby they'd lost between Thomas and Elizabeth. She laid wildflowers on each grave, taking a moment for quiet remembrance.
"We're doing well,"
she told Ethan's mother silently.
"Your son became the man you always knew he could be, and your grandchildren,
you would love them so." Arms wrapped around her from behind. Ethan, always knowing when she needed him. "She would have loved you," he said quietly. "Would have been proud to call you daughter."
"I hope so. I try to honor what she taught you, that strength should protect, not harm."
They stood together, looking out over their land. Cattle dotted the pastures. Horses grazed in the near field, and smoke rose from the bunkhouse where Cookie was starting supper preparations. It was a good life, built on the ashes of old pain, but growing strong and true. "No regrets?" Ethan asked. Their old ritual. "No regrets," Sarah confirmed.
"Only gratitude."
As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, Sarah thought about the girl she'd been. Frightened, desperate, alone. That girl could never have imagined this life, this love, this purpose. But she'd taken the first terrifying step into the unknown, and then another and another, until she'd walked herself home. The cabin where it all began was gone. But what it had sheltered, 2 souls finding each other in the darkness, lived on in every sunrise over the ranch, every laugh from their children, every quiet moment of connection. Sometimes the most precious things came from the most unlikely beginnings. A mistaken refuge becoming a sanctuary, a desperate flight becoming a journey home, a rancher's son and a runaway servant becoming partners in the deepest sense. Their love hadn't been the stuff of fairy tales. It had been forged in fear and tested by fire, marked by loss and strengthened by choice. But that made it real, and lasting, and worth every struggle that had brought them to this moment. As they reached the house, Thomas burst through the door, Elizabeth on unsteady legs behind him, both reaching for their parents with sticky hands and bright smiles. Sarah scooped up her daughter while Ethan caught his son, and for a moment they stood there in the doorway of their home, complete, content, and utterly themselves. The rancher's son had found his true north not in legacy or land, but in a woman brave enough to claim her freedom. And the woman who'd run through the night had discovered that sometimes, when you're fleeing one life, you run straight into the arms of destiny. Their story, begun in that small cabin, would echo through generations, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, courage over convention, and forging your own path through the wilderness of the heart. In the vast expanse of the western frontier, they had built something more precious than gold or cattle or land. They had built a love that would last forever, burning bright as the desert stars, constant as the mountains, and free as the wind that sang through the grasslands they called home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about this tale of love and courage in the Old West. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night, hit the like button, and support by clicking the hype button so more people can discover and enjoy this video. Your support means everything to our growing community of Western romance lovers.